Well, joining us now from Welwyn in Hertfordshire is the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. Good morning to you, Mr Shapps.
Morning.
You're going to bring in prison sentences of up to 10 years for people who lie about their coronavirus forms when they come into the country. What is the likely punishment going to be for decisions that were taken by government ministers that led to the needless deaths of thousands of people?
Well, first of all, I'm just watching that, what you were just playing there from Liverpool, and seeing the impact that this coronavirus is having on everyone. My own father's in a COVID ward right now in hospital and has been for quite some time, reminds us why it's necessary to make sure that people do adhere to these rules, including not bringing in new variations, new mutations, variants of this virus, which we may not be quite so ready to combat. So I think it's really important that we do have very clear messages sent out that you must not be travelling abroad at the moment. And that, in particular, if you go to these red list countries, you must come back and quarantine. That will include in government secured accommodation. And you can't lie about it on your form. If you do, then there are very severe penalties attached.
Let me first just pick up on what you said about your own father.
So sorry to hear that.
On a COVID ward. Very sorry to hear that. How is he doing?
Well, first of all, I just want to echo what you were saying to the doctors and nurses in that report there, which is the work they do is incredible. I speak to them every single day. Of course, we've not been able to visit my dad for 2 months now, but the work that they do and the way that they look after them and their patients with it all, and also particularly before they were vaccinated as staff, the risks that they put themselves at in working in those kind of conditions. And as was mentioned in the report a couple of times there, now you've got PPE, which is really, really outstanding. We've learned a lot in the last year, and the supply problems that were prevalent at the beginning because we didn't manufacture it in this country have gone away. But what they've been doing for nearly a year now has been extraordinary. And as you said, Piers, it's of course has been worse now, even though numbers are coming down in hospital. And the one good piece of news we had yesterday is my father was transferred from a larger COVID ward to a slightly smaller one. And we said, well, what's going on here? And they said, actually, we're starting to see a reduction in patients. But even now, even with that reduction, it's still higher than it was in the first peak. So we are not out of this yet. We just need to adhere to the lockdown and to the rules to stop more people ending up in those hospitals.
It must be very tough doing your job in a pandemic. I've never made any pretense about that. To do it when your own father is fighting for his life from COVID, that must be very tough for you.
It is very difficult, but I know that quite often people think that people in authority or power or in public service live a somehow different gilded life. I mean, the truth is you live the same life as everyone else, and coronavirus that gets everybody got my dad. Actually, it wasn't the reason he went into hospital originally, but unfortunately to pick it up. And we're all very worried, but the one thing it does do is to remind us all as we're making these decisions. I mean, as I'm in meetings later today, the so-called COVID-O meetings, which is the COVID operational meetings, where we have to weigh up these very difficult dilemmas often about where to prioritize, which rules, policies, laws to pass, how to add up resources to try to fight this. The fact that you're personally involved in that kind of way does weigh on your mind. And I don't think there's anyone in Britain now. There's nothing special about my situation, sadly. I don't think there's anyone in any family in Britain now who doesn't know.
Well, that is true. Have you been able to talk to your father?
Yeah, he was actually WhatsApp. He's 89, my dad, but he's always been sort of quite techie, and he was able to sort of WhatsApp call us. Unfortunately, the last day or two, we've not been getting contact from him in the same way, and we're obviously speaking to the nurses when we can. But they're very, very pressed, and this is the point, that the hospitals are still under immense pressure. We know that because sometimes it can be difficult to get through. But I do just pay tribute to their extraordinary patience, and not only with the patients themselves, sometimes who can be quite distressed, as my dad's been, but also just the relentless pressure of this and the hours that they've been working the day. The consultants in that
right,
film.
you raise a very good point. Look, first of all, we wish your father all the very best. And we didn't know that before we began the interview. And it shows you just how close this is getting to everybody, frankly. And we wish him a speedy recovery and hope he gets out of hospital soon and back with his family, as we do everybody who's fighting COVID right now. You talk about the sacrifice made by the NHS staff. The front page of a Daily Mirror today showing that nurses and doctors and other NHS heroes now being charged by a trust down in Epsom £500 just to park their car outside the hospitals where they're trying to save people's lives. Now, I want to play you a clip by Matt Hancock, who said this.
Well, we don't have parking charges in English hospitals, and we're not going to for the course of this pandemic, and that's the case.
I mean, he said they weren't going to be charged in the pandemic. We're nowhere near the end of the pandemic, probably not even halfway through it. What is going on? Why are these trusts fleecing our NHS heroes?
Yeah, I mean, and actually, we're paying for them not to charge for parking for NHS staff as well. I understand. I saw that story and asked the questions this morning, and the Department of Health tell me it's a single trust. They're looking into it urgently because they are receiving money to not charge the staff for parking. And of course, you know, with the hours that they're working, as we've just been discussing, and these extraordinary circumstances, and far from being out of the pandemic yet, that absolutely shouldn't be happening. And I'm sure it will be resolved, I hope, later today. So
can you give an unequivocal guarantee that there will be no parking charges on hospital grounds for any NHS staff for the duration of the pandemic?
Well, I know as a fact that we are paying as a government and as taxpayers to make sure that our NHS workers aren't paying during the pandemic. So something's gone wrong in that individual trust. So I'm not the health secretary to make you that pledge, but I'm pretty damn sure it's going to be fixed pretty fast.
OK, well, you're the Transport Secretary, so I hope they're listening to you. Also on transport, our border control, a lot of scratched heads again about the consistency here or lack of it. We're now going to have people coming in from the red zone countries, but not other countries where they can come in through the back door. We had a woman yesterday talking about coming in from South Africa via Doha and having absolutely no checks when she arrived at Heathrow 2 days ago.
And if you contrast that with what they're doing in Scotland, which is that anybody coming in from anywhere outside of the UK will have to quarantine in a hotel.
So I saw I saw that clip of the interview yesterday and was curious about it, actually, because it should be the case that you cannot board a flight without that information being checked. One, you must have filled in a pre-departure form, a passenger locator form. And secondly, you must have had a pre-departure test, not just from the red countries,
she had done all that. Her point was that when she got to the UK, there was no checking at our end.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Well, I know the Border Force are checking a very high proportion, I think 80%, 85% of people. But the fact that you can't get on the flight, and if they let them on the flight, then the airline itself will be fined for carrying passengers. That's the real security. So I didn't see her say that she hadn't been checked or that she hadn't had a pre-departure test.
No, she had that. I mean, I think the question people are really asking themselves, if the ongoing threat to our public health is from variants that maybe some we haven't even come across yet. If that remains the biggest threat, given the very successful rollout of the vaccine programme, and I congratulate the government, NHS, everyone on that, if the variants from other countries in particular are the threat, why do we not just shut down the border completely until everyone gets vaccinated and we can protect ourselves? It doesn't make sense to let some people in and others not.
So the implication of shutting down the border entirely is we wouldn't get the medicines in. 75% of them come through.
You could make an exception for emergency supplies and medical supplies and food supplies. You can make exceptions.
So there's probably something like a 95% reduction in the number of people coming to the country. So we're down to about 16 to 20,000 a day, of which thousands are the hauliers. I'm tracking 6, even 7,000 at the moment at the short straits. That's Dover to Calais alone, and there are lots of ports for goods in this country. We've got to have people come in to do, maintain vital infrastructure like water and energy and those sort of things, doctors. So you actually end up with quite a lot of people you just have to have come and go. Otherwise, we can't function as a country. And no one else people shouldn't be traveling for holidays. They shouldn't be traveling for leisure, either domestically or internationally. So I'm afraid, actually, the answer is right now, the borders are more or less closed, the very, very, very few reasons why you can travel.
Okay,
at the
Mr.
moment,
Shapps.
domestically or internationally.
Okay, well, once again, we send you all our very best for your father. And you, like so many families in the country, are going through a very difficult time, and we wish you a speedy and happy resolution to that situation that you find yourself in.